All right, welcome to Swing Angry Live. We've got a special guest, new Texas Rangers minor league hitting coach Collin McBride joins the show. Welcome to the show, Collin.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you jumping on in a probably hectic, pretty busy time in your life. I know you just got back in town today, I believe, didn't you?
Yeah. I was just down at the Arizona complex, just kind of getting oriented and getting a chance to check it out before spring training gets rolling. And it's pretty chaotic then, so give me a good chance to get acclimated.
Yeah, for sure. And get into Arizona and experience some of that nicer weather for this time of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
For those who may not know who you are, can you kind of give our audience an introduction about where you're from, your experiences in the game of baseball, and how you got to exactly where you are now?
Yeah. Graduated high school from Wisconsin, Lakeside Lutheran High School in Wisconsin in 2013. Went to Northwestern College in Iowa, Orange City, Iowa, a little NAIA school out there. Went there for 4 years, played baseball there. And then when I got back to Wisconsin, I worked for a sports training facility. The guy that owned it kind of wanted out. So I basically took it over, bought it out. And then a couple months in, one of my good buddies, Charles Davis, who was my college teammate, roommate, all that for 4 years. He had been playing a little bit of indie ball and ended up getting released. He went to school for business admin. So, I called him up and said, hey, man, like I do the strength and conditioning, the training. My background is exercise science, human performance, but, I needed an admin guy. So he came out and, at 22, 23-ish, we just kind of dove right into it, made a lot of mistakes. You know how that goes. None of us really went to business school. So, made a lot of mistakes along the way. We've still currently run that and own that. And then in 2019 at the ABCA baseball conference in Nashville, College of Central Florida, their head coach, Marty Smith, he was presenting with Driveline on a little bit of on a side panel there. And their previous hitting guy, strength and conditioning guy, had just gotten hired by the Indians at the time. And so, I just kind of hit him up, trying to really just get some info about recruiting, more like what's the crux of recruiting, kind of cut the fluff stuff. And we got to talking. He asked for my number. And then I ended up coming back later that night to interview for the job. And then they called me back a couple hours later, offered me the job. So I went home the next day, drove back to Wisconsin, packed a bag, and flew out to Ocala, Florida with just a backpack. So it was pretty wild that year. Then COVID hit obviously a little bit into the season. So that cut our season short. I believe at the time we were like 22-7. So it would have been a good year. We had a lot of really, really talented players. And then I came back, worked at the facility, and that's kind of what I do. In the winter and summer, I work here. And then I was at College of Central Florida in the fall and spring. And then just as of recent, I just got hired by the Texas Rangers this offseason. I'll be in Down East, which is the low A affiliate in Kinston, North Carolina.
That's ironic. Kinston's only about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half from where I'm at. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Kinston's a great little town. A lot of baseball history. The Down East Wood Ducks are a fairly kind of new branded team because they used to be the Kinston Indians back when I was growing up.
Yeah, I think it's their 5th season as the Wood Ducks.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool, man. If you're a fan of the Major League movie franchise, the whole theme of that movie and stuff kind of relates to the Kinston Indians mascot and their heritage and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool to make that connection between that movie and that organization here in this little small corner of North Carolina.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you've got a varied background. I think your exercise science background will be pretty good for some of my audience because we try to talk about like how building hitters is not just in the cages, but it also happens with your weight training and your exercise regimen, your diet, your nutrition, and stuff like that. So how did you help out hitters develop from that side of it as well? Like, how does that exercise science background help in the development of hitters?
Yeah. I mean, number one, like, your physical side is a huge part of just playing in general. You kind of have, how I break it down is, you have like your skill stuff, so that would be like if you want to call it your swing mechanics or your movement stuff, same thing as throwing. But then, you have the physical side. So, you can have kids that move really, really well, right? They got a great swing, they can play the game, but they don't scale up because of the physicality, because they don't realize that, the training side is really what separates a lot of guys at the next level. We at College of Central Florida, we were lucky to get a lot of really physical guys coming in. One that comes to mind is Edric Felix. He came in as I think even underaged as a college freshman, and I mean, the guy was like 210, 6'1", pulling 550 on the straight bar deadlift. Like, I mean, that's something that, like, when you start at that level already, it lets you devote a lot more time and energy to the skill work. Whereas, guys who don't have that side of it coming in or getting to the higher levels, you got to spend a lot of your training economy building that and really focus on that, which just kind of takes away from other aspects of the game. So, that would be my overarching thing for like younger guys, is just, take it serious, and it takes time. That's the thing, is one off season isn't gonna, change you physically. Like, yeah, you might put on 10 pounds, 15 pounds, you might put a little bit of strength, but I kind of joke about like dad strength or old man strength. Like, that's long-term strength, right? Like, those guys have acquired that through a lot of years of physical, like, activity, movement. And there's a difference between being temporarily strong and being long-term strong. Like, there's guys that they could maybe not lift a weight for 3 months and come back and still be repping pretty close to their 1 rep max, right? Like, that's long-term acquired strength. Whereas some guys who just make gains for a short off season, they don't lift or train as hard in season, and then those are gone. So I think the really important part is consistency over a long period of time. And the sooner you can start, the more you'll be able to basically carry that and build off that.
Yes. So two things you just mentioned, like sooner you can start, and long term in season lifting, so you can sustain it. Those are two topics I think that would be beneficial, because a lot of people don't exactly know, like, how young is too young to start weight training, or strength and agility training and things like that. And there's a lot of different beliefs on in season lifting and stuff like that.
Yeah. Number one, I would say there's really no age that's too young. It's just what you're doing that's age appropriate. So the example I use is, I'm from Wisconsin, Midwest, so you get a lot of farm kids. Like, those kids are from
Those country strong kids.
Yeah, exactly. From 5, 6 years old, right? They've been moving hay, they've been, hauling buckets, whatever they're doing, physical labor. So, I think if you relate it to that context for younger kids, there is no age that's too early. Do I recommend like throwing, a 8-year-old under a barbell for a back squat? No, not at all. Right. I mean, there's give and take to it. You can do that. There's youth kids that train for Olympic lifting, but just doing things like, basically, I break it down for our youth kids here at the facility is just push, pull, hinge, squat, and carry. Like, they're going to push something, whether it's horizontal. So like a push up, right, is a horizontal press, or a vertical press, something overhead. They're going to pull vertically, a pull up, right, a lat pull down, single arm, whatever. They're going to row, and then they're going to hinge, whether it be both legs bilateral or single leg. And they're also going to squat, right, bilateral or single leg. And then they're also just going to carry stuff. Farmer carries, just carrying a hex bar with weight on it for laps is one of the most underrated ways to just kind of build some physicality and build some strength. So I think if you just keep it really simple like that, there's no age that's too young to train. And then
it's funny. My daughter's 3, and or she'll be 3 in April here pretty soon. So she'll go into our facility here in our backyard, and I've got various weighted balls sitting in there, such as like 2 or 3 4-pound med balls, all the way up to like 10. And her curiosity, just, she walks in there and she's like, grabbing it, picking it up, walking with it. I'm like, that 4-pound ball, and you're only like 2 or 3 years old, and she already has the curiosity to do it. And I think if you take a lot of younger kids, just natural everyday activities, and use it as resistance, and use their body weight as resistance, it's a good start and a good foundation.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. I mean, like you said, the simpler the better. Even pushing a sled, like that's a super underrated thing. That I think, like, there's no age too young to do that, or to drag something, carry tires, just do anything to be physically active, climb a tree, like all that stuff that's kind of not as common nowadays. That was probably more when we were kids.
Yeah, when people were getting outdoors more, and screen time wasn't as much as it is now.
For sure.
What about in-season lifting? I know, you just touched on a little bit about it's important to start lifting, because I think a lot of kids, they come into high school probably first time experience with, their a good weightlifting program, or maybe not even a great weightlifting program. But a lot of athletes, when it's in season, they don't lift at all.
Yeah. That's the number one way to basically hinder yourself, in my opinion. There's a big part of that comes with balance. So training economy is something that I talk to, whether it's kids at my facility, or especially the older kids, the college guys and such. It's a little more important for them to understand, just because kids are more plastic in terms of they recover a lot better, and they're more malleable. So like, when a younger kid breaks a bone, they heal very quickly, whereas somebody who's 65 takes a lot longer to heal the same thing. So kids, yes, you do have to monitor it as much as throwing volume, those things, but as far as activity, like, kids are pretty able to do a lot of activity, and still improve and stay healthy, or not overtrain. Whereas college guys, you have to be a lot more meticulous. Their schedule, they're maybe doing homework till 1 a.m, then they got an early class, they got lifting. So with that in season, it's really about just regulating the volume. And this is the hard part. I think that's what makes in-season training tough, is you have to know yourself, and the better you know your body, the better it is. A lot of our guys, that's why I really try to teach our guys what training economy is about, not preset things. I give them a lot of autonomy in season. Yeah, we'll have our set lifts and things we do, but they might come up to me and say, like, hey Collin, I just played 4 games this week every day at shortstop. My legs are just heavy, and it's like, all right, well, let's sub something for, our big lift for something a little bit lighter, or just a different move. So I think it's hard to be, and I say this all the time, it's very hard to be a good strength and conditioning coach, because it's not just about book knowledge. It's about having feel for your athletes. It's about kind of, having situational awareness, and basically understanding what your goal is, which is playing and winning games. Your training should not hinder your performance in season, but you also have to understand that you're not going to feel great every day, especially at the professional level. Like, if you think those guys are feeling great for 160 games, like, you're fooling yourself. They're
without a doubt.
Tired. They're doing all those things. So just to kind of lay out a really simple thing that we do is, in season at CF, we lifted 3 times a week, sometimes 4, depending on the game schedule. But we really just kind of kept it very simple in the way of, when we had our bigger breaks, so like our 2 days of just practice, we would do our heavy lift, right? So that would be our heavy press, our heavy squat, our heavy hinge, more of our low reps, high weight stuff. So they have 2 or so days to recover. And then the kind of in between, where we had a game, say Wednesday, Friday, on that Thursday, we'd hit a little unilateral lift. So, something more movement quality based, like a single leg pistol squat, something like that, a single arm press, a cable row, things like that. And then if we had to lift day of based on our schedule, we do this little power lift, like trap bar jump, bench press throws, just very simple things that aren't going to fatigue you, but you're still getting a lot of force output.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, everybody took weightlifting during their sport-specific season. Such, a football player would take weightlifting in the fall, and a lot of baseball players are taking weightlifting in the spring and things. And when I was going through school, all of my buddies and stuff, they'd be like, "Oh, it's game day. We don't have to do anything today because I don't want to be tired for my game." So with that being said, like, should you be lifting on game day? I mean, I think you should. I think a lot of all the good programs are doing it, but it's like you mentioned, you kind of modify the program based on what the players need, and they can still develop physically and continue their lifting, but it may not be a heavy day depending on how that player feels and what their schedule is today.
Absolutely. No, I mean, like I said, at the professional level, which, for a lot of kids playing the game now, whether they're 10 years old, like that's what they aspire, right? They want to play professional baseball. That's their dream. And, especially as you get older, you have to start doing things that will prepare you, right? Way I look at it is like you can't prepare for the environment you're in. You always have to be preparing for the environment you want to be in. So, if you're just matching the environment you're in, you're only lifting 2 days a week in season because you're in high school and you think, oh, I don't want to be tired. Well, like the professional guys are doing their heavy lift and then they got to go play a game.
Yeah,
And
I mean they're
that
playing
determines
every day almost.
and that determines like that's their livelihood, right? Like you're just tired because you stayed up playing video games, where they're tired because they just had a long bus trip and they play 6 days a week.
Yeah, they don't have a day where it's not Tuesday, Friday we play and we have a few practices. Like every day is game day pretty much, or it's a travel day and they still have to lift and show up at 7 o'clock fresh and ready to go. So I think it's important that we teach the youth athletes, even at the middle school, high school, and if they do have aspirations to play at higher levels, that you've got to get used to training the right way and building that body and building some strength, because a lot of kids come into college undersized.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's the number one thing. Like I said, just to kind of circle back is, we get limited training economy, and if you're the true freshman, especially with COVID and the backup of players, as I'm sure it's really tough to find a spot. Like this fall, we cut a lot of guys that were really good, like that were really good players, but or there's guys that are very interested in the program for, say, our next year's recruiting class. They're really good players, but there's just not a spot for them because they're 18 having to compete with kids who are 21 at the junior college level, even who are much more physical than them. So and the other part of it is like as you go up, hopefully, right, the right programs, your skill coaches become better. And so what I would say is, if you can spend that time when you're with a skill coach who can teach you the game at a higher level, right, coach you in the technical skills of the game better, basically, you want to spend that energy and effort doing that. You don't want to spend that time that you could maybe be spending a little cage time before practice, having to have more lift and stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Let's take us through like your hitting development journey as a hitting coach. Like, were you always a hitting guy, or was your background? We know the exercise science background, but how did you start dabbling into the hitting side of the game?
Yeah. I guess it's funny, like, your own personal experiences definitely dictate, like the person you become and stuff. So, I was never a good defender. I never really had a position. I caught a little bit in high school because we really didn't have a catcher, per se. And I went to a small school. So they were like, hey, man, like, hop behind the dish. So I caught. I got to college and they were like, dude, you're not a catcher. Like, what are you doing? So, I played a little bit of first base. I tried playing a little bit of outfield, and I just never really had a position. But the one thing I did know always growing up and hearing is, if you can hit, they'll find a spot for you. It doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my view on it, is like, I know I'm not a good defender and I didn't really know what to do to become a better defender, especially when I was going through college, 2013 ish, 17. There wasn't a lot of info on like developing your arm action or resources to become a better thrower or defensive stuff. So it was kind of like, I know enough about, or I know a little bit about hitting, and I was always like a fairly good hitter. So I think it was just easier to study and learn, and then go from there.
Yeah.
But
So they didn't tell you if you're a great bunter, they'll find a spot for you. They said
yeah,
if you're a great hitter.
uh, if you want to know about bunting, I think you could go to the College of Central Florida, go to our hitting stats from last year. And again, don't quote me because I don't remember, but there was, I want to say almost halfway through the season, we were the number one team, offensive team in the entire like Division I junior college for like 7 categories. I think we were leading in runs scored by almost 150 more runs than the second place team, who only had like 3 less games than us. So yeah, no, and I think we maybe had one bunt, maybe, and that was like a suicide squeeze to win a game. Actually, I think we did win the game on the suicide squeeze. That we
one,
did.
of, one of my proudest stats as a former JUCO hitting coach is being able to lead the region in fewest attempted sack bunts in the whole year.
I love it.
And we were top 5 in all the major categories of offense, and we were leading the one that said fewest sack bunt attempts. Because I mean, it probably went down as a sack bunt, but I never called one sack bunt. If we bunted, we were trying to score a run. We were never giving away an out to move a guy to second. It was always like if we bunted, we're bunting for a hit, and if we happen to move the guy to third while we're doing it, that's a bonus. And getting to first base was a bonus. But we were either safety squeezing a run in, or trying to get a guy to third and also trying to make it safe at first, but not just giving away outs. But for some reason, people on social media think if you're a great bunter, it also means you can hit. But
yeah, man, I don't know how much time we have to dive into all the perceptual things of hitting and why that's completely not true at all. Those two do not correlate with each other whatsoever. But
no, they don't. And I think like part of me creating this show is to talk about like hitting development. And, I want to talk to other minds and learn from people that I bring on the show, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm learning from other people and trying to add to my tool belt, and hopefully some other people will learn too. And I just don't make the connection between like, if I want to develop hitters who can compete in a game against some of the nastiest pitching that we see today, whether it's at the college or the professional level, or just develop a middle school or a high school hitter to competitively help their team win a game. It doesn't matter if they're a great bunter. It doesn't mean that they're going to be able to execute a timely swing and square a ball up when somebody's pitching to them and trying to get them out.
no, yeah, you're spot on. And to that, I would add is, you only get so many reps, especially at the youth level, right? Like owning a travel ball org, I see this all the time is. And why we really push for this, actually on our softball too, which shout out to our softball girls. They rake, they don't bunt. But like you're getting so many limited reps at the youth levels. You might get 2 or 3 good pitches to swing at in like even 2 games, sometimes like there's kids that'll get 6 walks. And if you're really going to waste those opportunities on bunting the ball, I mean, those reps just don't add up. Like, I always say this is the best hitters hit, man. Like, why do you think they're so good? Is because they hit. Like when you have your middle of your order bat coming up to, late in the game and it's a tie ball game, like he didn't bunt when he was younger and he's not going to bunt now. Like he needs to learn how to do what he has to do when it matters.
Yeah,
and the only way of doing that is actually hitting.
Yeah, and I think we handcuff so many youth hitters into and then I'm not saying teaching the skill of bunting is not something that kids need. I'm just saying at a development age, it's the lowest skill on the totem pole that helps them make a team. As far as, if I don't have speed, if I'm just an average defender, I'm an average thrower, my arm strength's average. Like my hit tool is what I need to develop, because the field gets bigger and the bat gets bigger. It doesn't get easier as you get older to hit. So when we don't take the time to teach all of our 12 and 10 and 11-year-old kids to, move well and just hit a hard line drive over the infield, because we spend all of the time, well, you're not really that good of a hitter, so let me teach you how to bunt, because we can expose like youth defenses are not fundamentally sound. So of course, if we can use bunting to an advantage to win an 11U game, but are we sacrificing this kid's ability to compete when he's 15 years old?
Absolutely. I don't know if you ever, like, you probably have, but the 80-20 rule, right? Like, why would I spend a lot of my time, on something that I'm only doing 20% of the time, right? Like, I'm going to spend my most effort on what I'm going to do a lot. So, and I agree, teaching bunting isn't necessarily wrong, but I'll also, a little caveat to that is like, I guarantee you, if we got a kid at 18 years old, right, that ranked, at 18 and never bunted his entire life, I bet we could teach him how to bunt in like a week and a half. If you had a kid
Exactly.
that was the most elite bunter on the planet and they showed up and they had to play in Florida JUCO where most guys are 88 to 92, right? You even get some guys like 95 plus, like they're not even sniffing the field. So it's just, you got to spend your time appropriately and the reps you're going to get, because time comes fast. I know they're only kids, but the more you can, gear their development and just spend the time what they're doing in the right places, you don't have to worry as much in the long term. I think that's why, like, so many professional players, guys that played the game at a high level, their kids are so good. Is number one, like, they know how to act, right? Because they've seen, like, their parents know how to act, because they played at the highest level, but also because the parents understand, the dad understands what's most important at the level, so they just have their kids spend time doing what's most important, and then over time that adds up over those youth years, and by the time they're in high school, they've put so many more reps in the right places than the other kids.
Yeah, you don't get that time back at the development stage, and we need to use that time wisely for long term athletic development, so that when if they do want to play high level baseball and they have to step into an environment where you're facing 88 to 92 on a regular basis, that you can stand in the box with some confidence, and you're not just some fish out of water who is lost and trying to survive and trying to figure out, somebody save me, and at that youth level, I don't understand why people don't equate the two things of, you don't have to be like, you're not saying bunting is not a skill, because everybody who is like, and I won't name any names, but there's a lot of people out there who are like, you either bunt or you don't bunt crowd, but it's not even about that. It's about how can we maximize our players' development so that they have a chance to compete at the highest level. Because it's like you said, you get an 18-year-old kid who comes in who can hit competitive pitching 88 to 92 and hold his own in the box. You can teach that kid how to bunt if you need him to safety squeeze a run in, or drag for a hit or something, but you really aren't even going to spend a lot of time with the kid who can't even time up a fastball or anything like that. But he can really tap one on the ground good. Like, that kid's never playing anyway. Like, he, at best, he's a fringe guy who's on the cut list, or he's just a bench guy who pinch hits once in a while when you're losing big or you're winning big.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's tough, and just kind of as an example, because I know they're listening. So I got to give a couple people a little shout out quick. The Stranges, and then also KJ and Vishnu, they were two families that I did lessons with, pretty consistently while I was down at College of Central Florida. And one of the coolest things that I was able to see was, Anderson is his name. We would set up the machine a little bit. And the big thing for him was like long-term development, right? Like, yeah, he struggled against slow pitching, don't get me wrong. But when you get the kids throwing hard like that's when he was at his best. But they really bought into the long-term training concept. And one of the coolest things that I ever saw was we had the machine set up for practice that our college guys were hitting on. And I just left it. And he was 12 years old at the time. And one of our college guys, Victor, he wanted to get some reps. And so he's like, hey, I know you're giving a lesson, but can I hop in? And they hit together on the same machine. And, it was like, our guys would see it all the time. They would come around and just be like, man, he's really hitting like the same machine we're hitting for practice and like getting barrels. All right. Granted, is he hitting the same as our guys? No, but like, he would get barrels. He would be competitive, put the ball in play, and like, maybe he struggles against the softer pitching a little bit sometimes, but I know for a fact when he's, 15, 16 years old, like, he's had so many more realistic reps than those other kids who just hit front toss and tee work all the time.
Yeah, he's going to have a chance to hold his own in a game that probably matters. Maybe when he's playing varsity baseball and they're playing a conference game on a weeknight and they're facing a tough pitcher, he's probably going to be able to compete a little bit.
Yeah,
And I
I
mean,
would agree.
I think that's what you're going for. Like you want these guys to, or you want the guys you train to be able to perform in the game. Yeah, because that's the ultimate bottom line is, no matter what you're doing in your training environment, and what your beliefs may personally be, if your guys perform in a game, that's the bottom line right there. And I think some people get lost in, well, I see this drill on the internet, but I don't understand it, so let me bash it, or I don't agree with what you said, I think you're wrong. But at the end of the day, if you're helping hitters perform in a game and your hitters trust you and you have a good relationship with those hitters, that's what it's all about. And when you create an environment where your 12-year-old kid's hitting on the same machine as some of those college guys, and he's able to get a couple of barrels in there instead of getting blown away, I mean, you're headed down the right direction.
Absolutely. No, yeah, I think you hit it spot on there.
What do you think? So talk about some of the training environments that you would put some of your hitters in a private setting, how you would develop them, practice environment, deliberate practice or block practice and random practice.
Yeah. And I'll kind of actually like, blend that the private setting, because to be honest, like at my facility, we don't do lessons. We just do an open training concept. So like we just have on floor trainers, whether it's myself or Grace Delman, who's our like head trainer while I'm not around. We're just out there on the training floor and kids can come in at any time, hit, we'll do front toss, tee, whatever, feed the machine, just set up stuff. But to kind of build on that is what I basically my big principle, and just doing a lot of research into like motor learning and skill development and all those things, which I think for anyone who wants to be a great coach, just to preface it with this, you have to get uncomfortable with your learning. Like if you're not learning things that you are uncomfortable with, you're not really learning. I taught myself computer programming when COVID first happened. It was something that I always wanted to do, to be able to manipulate data, visualizations, all that stuff. And I mean, it was uncomfortable, right? Like, I mean, I sat there and I didn't even know what I was trying to do. But you basically just start. So that, just to lead in with that, is I think anyone who wants to be a good coach, you have to learn about skill development, motor learning, like all those concepts. And then you'll really see why, to what you were saying and what we were talking about earlier, why the things we were talking about matter in the long run. But to kind of get into it, what I really call it simply, there's fancy terms, and you talked about like block learning, random practice, all that. I just call it skill blending is my simplest way. So there's a balance, right, between skill development, emotional state, and like just a lot of factors that blend in. So what I really try to do is basically separate hitting into two things, whether you basically have your striking or your movement, right? So like how your body moves, which is going to be best accomplished in a setting where the perception of a moving object doesn't matter. So basically, right, like T work, and for older kids, front toss, right, is not really perceptually based, right? Like they don't have a hard time tracking the ball, in the T, it's sitting there, right? Whereas younger kids, even front toss can be a little perceptually demanding, right? Like they're still learning how to track the ball. But what I would say is in those environments, right, you're kind of building your movement or your skill, your striking ability. And then as it scales up, right, you're challenging that skill into perception and like how your visual system and like what you've done dictates how your body moves. So basically what I'll do is, most guys are working on some type of movement all the time, right? Like we're trying to clean things up. So we'll start maybe a little bit of T work, right? Just a couple drills that they're going to get primed, right? Like they're getting their body feeling what they're trying to do movement wise, if that makes sense. And then from there, right, then we're taking that into a little bit more demanding environment, but still controlled. So then front toss for the older kids, right, where they can still work those same 2 to 3 movements in that, where they're still not really being challenged on what they're seeing with the ball, but it's a moving ball now, and they're able to basically try to implement that in a little bit more chaotic setting, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then you can take it into either hand BP or, some type of light machine work. And then eventually like a real challenging setting, which would be more realistic machine setups. So basically what I try to do is whether it's youth or college, anything professional, is basically just blend that progression all the way up to a realistic environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the highest test is obviously going to be the game. When a pitcher's throwing live and trying to get you out, that's probably the most difficult environment a hitter's going to experience. And then when you scale back from that, you want to try to meet the hitter, like where are they currently at in their prerequisite skill development? How old are they? What experience do they have? What skills do they already have? Where are their current deficiencies at? Because you probably wouldn't train a 10-year-old exactly like you would train, a 21-year-old or 22-year-old college junior or something like that, because they come from different prerequisite skills at the moment. We're closer to that game-like training and that highest difficulty environment at 21 years old, and we can probably spend more time in that environment than we are with the 9-year-old who maybe doesn't even have fine motor skills and balance, and they're still growing. They're still developing, who they are as an athlete and things like that. So do you agree or disagree that you train those athletes a little bit differently depending on where their skills currently are?
Yeah, I think that's just where it goes into the fact of like coach's eye, coach's feel, whatever you want to call it, right? Like as I kind of said earlier with strength and conditioning, you can have all the technical knowledge in the world, you can know every little thing, but the great coaches at the highest level, they just have feel. They understand people, they understand interactions, they have this like sixth sense, right, of what needs to be done. So I think a big part of that, I agree to some level of what you said, but I also disagree a little bit in the fact of I think it just depends at the current time. So for maybe the college guy, right, we might spend a lot of time in just a non-perceptual setting if we have limited time, or we're really, really trying to focus on making a movement change, right? We're just going to get a ton of reps, even though they're not translated yet. We're just going to get reps on that. Whereas with the youth, I really try to keep it balanced, to be honest. I know kids don't have the best movements, and there's all sorts of different views on this, but I'm a very like free learning type of guy, and I think you learn a lot from watching kids. So sometimes I think there's a balance that has to be had, like I talked about, with kind of emotional state and confidence, where yeah, I'm gonna get a younger kid, a 10-year-old kid, right? We might do a little bit of stuff that builds some confidence, but then I'm gonna put him in a setting that maybe he's failing, succeeding, like 50-50 for a little bit. But then I'm also gonna sometimes, and again, this is where there's a lot of disagreement, but I think just my own personal opinion is like, I'm also going to take the kid and put him in an environment where he maybe has like 5% success, right? And I think sometimes you can learn a lot from that, right? It's not so much that they're getting really that much better, and I'm not a big mental toughness guy. I think that is what it is. But I think like kids can learn a lot from themselves, like maybe they really, really struggle one time and they're on the machine, getting them, say they're hitting for an hour, 40 minutes of it is in like a super, super challenging setting where they're having success 1 out of 20, right? Maybe it's not the best for learning, but I think in terms of them understanding like the process and failure and things like that, it kind of balances with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so what I was going back to is like the college guy, he's got that prerequisite skill set and it's pretty high. And you got to meet him like where his needs are. Like you said, if you're making a movement change, the movement change is probably not going to be impactful if you're just throwing the slider machine at him as you're working through that movement change and he's trying to feel something new. You may start out in a lower difficulty environment, such as some tee and some front toss and blend, and then try to test it into that game like environment.
Yes.
And then when you talk about the younger kid, like for example, you get kids who come in with all different prerequisite skill sets. Like I get some 12-year-olds who are really like just athletic. They have really good hand-eye coordination. Like their bat to ball skills are just probably in the top 10% of kids their age, and they're just really good at just matching playing with the ball and stuff. So if I give them some front toss and they're like, man, I'm barreling these like 8 or 9 out of 10, I'm like, you can tell this kid's got a pretty good background. He's probably been playing for a little while. So let's see what you can do off of the hack attack. We'll throw maybe some blocked fastballs at you and just see how you handle it. And if they go and they're like 0 for 20 now, well, first you want to see like emotionally, how does that kid handle the failure?
For sure.
If they're just like miserable, you probably want to talk to them and get them out of the environment instead of just like, all right, for your next 5 lessons, since you hit front toss real good, we're just going to go 5 lessons in a row and you figure out how to hit this fastball until you figure it out. And if they go 4 or 5 lessons in a row and they're 1 out of 20, like they're consistently failing every single time, you got to check in and make sure, like, is this kid at a point where he can even handle that failure, or is he on the opposite end? Do you have that kid who, like, now they just don't believe in themselves at all, and they think, well, I'm not very good as a hitter, I don't even need to play this game anymore, So I think it's like you said, if you know the athlete you're training and you know what challenges they like some kids like to confront adversity and they like to confront the challenge, and then there's other kids where you have to meet them in the middle and blend it, where this drill is probably going to be really easy and you're going to have a lot of success. This drill will get a little bit harder, and you get into that like sweet spot of the training where you're succeeding about 50% of the time, and you've got to focus enough to do it. And then this drill might be, hey, this is probably going to be more game like. You might get 3 barrels out of 10, but if you get 3 barrels out of 10, you're competing pretty good for the level of difficulty you're at.
Absolutely. I think you reiterated that really well, and kind of explained that out, because couldn't agree more on that. I think, like, just kind of build off of it. Exactly what you said is it's that feel part of it, where sometimes the kids who are very good for their age, and are in that point, like sometimes you need to do that, where I've done that, where it's like, hey, the next 3 times we meet, like, we're going to do a little bit of T-work front toss, 15 minutes, like get going, just do your initial like skill feel stuff. But we're going to spend 40 minutes and it's going to be tough. But just know, like, it's going to be 3 times. But all I'm asking is that every time for the next 3 times we meet, you show up and you're just ready to go to work and attack it, right? And maybe it's not the most fun, right? And again, there's balance with kids. Like, it does have to be fun, but also, like, sometimes they got to face a little bit of adversity. And again, just from personal experience with some of the kids I've worked with, I've seen that, where, again, just going back to Anderson, who I was talking about before, like there was like 3 weeks where it was like, he'd just take on the machine. And it's like, they're all right down the middle, but he was just like, there was something going on. And then all of a sudden it was like, just finally, like the 3rd day, he like caught like kind of a barrel. And then like, it's also with that is you just got to keep building them up too, depending on the environment, right? Like there's challenge, like sometimes you got to challenge kids, but also, sometimes you have to just build them up. And that's what a lot of those were, is, those 3 sessions of just like really challenging machine setting. It's like, I'm just building them up the whole time. We're not, I'm not talking about, hey, you're doing this wrong or whatever. It's just like, hey, you can do this, man. Like, I know you can do this. You got to believe in yourself. And then it's like, once they flip that corner, then like it's just crazy to see the confidence. And then that's when you get the situation I was talking about earlier, where it's like dude's hitting off the machine with college guys, and it's like he had to have that short stretch of struggle and and tough spot, but once he got over the edge, then it was just it's from there.
Yeah, I think it's so important that coaches know the athlete they're training, so they can meet them where they need to be met, and challenge them appropriately, because you don't want to be on one end where we're just living in our comfort zone all the time, and then you don't want to be on the other end where you're just like, you don't know how to swim, I'm just going to throw you in the ocean and say, figure it out, So you're trying to meet them right in the middle so you can prepare them for that long-term success. Let's talk about like college of Central Florida. You jump in and you take that job as a hitting coach. Like, what were some of the strategies and some of the training economy things that you put in place that you think helped your guys hit on game day?
Yeah. Well, number one, Marty, head coach there, great guy in terms of, just to kind of throw this out there for people that don't know, I'm the 6th guy out of there that's in professional baseball now. I'm the 6th straight guy that was the volunteer assistant there. So, just to give him a shout out, anyone who is wanting to become a high level coach, you couldn't ask for a better environment. Tech, elite players, a lot of professional, people around, whether it's scouts, a lot of high level college programs there, and just the experience that he's had winning over 800 games. Like I got to learn a lot, but also the fact that he's a very like empowering guy in the fact of like he's a true what I would consider a manager at that level, which isn't common. He tries to bring in guys to fill roles, and as long as you take care of your business, it's really like he trusts you and let you do what you want. So we don't do long distance running. We do most of our like aerobic training, right? So like short duration, high intensity training, whether it be like med ball stuff, sprint stuff before practice, but no like crushing volume basically. All of our training that we did was geared for a reason, whether it was strength, movement quality, or force output or power output, however you want to, for all the sticklers out there, however you want to define it. Basically, that's what I broke it down to. So are we trying to move stuff fast? Are we trying to move well? Or are we trying to produce a lot of force and move something heavy? And I think when you keep the goal in those terms, it makes it really simple, and again, I'm not saying that aerobic conditioning is bad, right? It's not bad to take a jog or do whatever, but if your guys are running 10 pulls every day, and they're beat from that, like you're not going to get good quality swings. They're not going to be able to move at a high capacity to produce change in their swing and in their skill development. So really just understanding that, as far as in the fall we lift 4 days a week in the morning, so we have groups that lift before practice, couple groups. And then also pitchers, something that we do is pitchers lift in accordance with their throwing schedule. So, usually after a guy has a high volume, like say a bullpen, an outing, whatever, that's when you're going to lift your heavy lift because you're kind of already recovering in that same way from like muscular fatigue, soreness, all those things. So that's when you'll hit your heavy lift, your big strength stuff. And then a couple days out as it goes, then you'll hit your movement quality in the middle. And then day of or day before your outing, that's when you're hitting like your high velocity movements. So like your med ball throws, again, like plyo push-ups, trap bar jumps, any of that type of stuff. So again, just really understanding how to organize the training to which it benefits playing, not takes away from the skill itself or the game.
Yeah, what were some of the things you guys would do for practices? Like, how'd you guys prepare for games, and how'd you prepare your guys to hit and face the elite type pitching you see in Florida JUCO?
Yeah, so now you're getting into the crux of it, which is like the part I was hoping we get to talk about. So really just on the hitting side, usually, or I'll just say this, generally how our practices would go is, they'd show up, do their warm up, do any bands or plyos for position guys that they're going to do. If it's a heavy defensive day, then they'll do throwing. A big thing that we did is just like, people have all sorts of different opinions on this, but regulating the throwing volume for position guys, I think, is huge as well. If we're just taking some fly balls that day, like they don't need to throw, they don't need to air it out. Like they'll just play some light toss, just enough to throw it in. Or infielders, maybe they're just doing ground balls only or double play feeds, but they're not, thrown across the diamond. So the biggest thing I think with that is regulating that throwing volume as well. Again, so you can, when you need to be able to throw and throw often, you can do it, right? You can do your relays and your hard throws from the outfielder. You can do your real defensive stuff in the same way as kind of just touching on the training stuff. But as far as that, usually what our hitting stuff looked like is we would set up either 3 or 4 groups, depending on what we're trying to do, but we'll have a on-field group, a cage group, or 2 cage groups, and then a shag group. And so really like to kind of get in a little bit of prefacing to this is what my big theory or kind of using computer programming skills is basically understanding how swing or like swing data and exit data go together. So being able to pair blast motion and Yacker Tech, which is like our on-field capture system for those of people who don't know, like TrackMan, Hawkeye, StatCast, whatever you want to call it, right? That's ours is Yacker Tech.
Yeah, that would provide like your batted ball outcome data and
Yep.
stuff like that.
And all the pitching, ball flight, etc.
Yeah.
So really what my kind of hypothesis getting into early was basically like using those paired together because they're separate technologies. So I just built a little program that basically like could match the timestamps and all this stuff. That doesn't really matter, but basically like matched it. So I could get all of their info for our BP setups, whatever we were doing. But really what I broke it down to is, I'm sure you've seen the Rays kind of like pitching clock, right? Have you seen that graphic?
Yeah.
So like most people train the same way, right? Like your coach throws the same BP. You hit the same guy every day. You hit from the same spot. You do the same stuff. So like that's my example is the kid who had a left-handed dad, right? He's probably pretty good at hitting lefties, like because his dad always threw lefty BP. So what we really try to do is I looked at like all of our previous years in-game data, all the pitching stuff, and even included our own guys. And if you think about it in terms of that release clock, right? Like different release heights are going to produce different angles to the plate. And also how they release, right? On the side, on top, whatever, right? That's going to produce different spin movement. So really what I try to break it down to was like, what are guys good at, right? Like what angles are they good at and what aren't they good at? So, we would test like high slot righty, we would test like mid slot, a little bit lower, low, even subby, and then BP as well. And then basically we're able to kind of create like a hitter profiling system, right? That said like, okay, hey, this guy's really good at high release, right? His bat path is able to match that. But when it gets lower, he struggles. Like he doesn't have a good path. And so kind of gearing their training to what they need when you have that information is really what we did. And then obviously in a team setting, right? I'm not going to like lie and make up stuff to make people happy. Like, team setting's messy. It's not a facility. Like you can't individualize everything. Like you don't have time for that. So really it's kind of looking at what our biggest needs are, right? Like, what setups or angles or like what breaking balls change, like what did guys struggle at as a whole the most? Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time hitting that and then just kind of work our way down, right, of what guys struggled the most at. And then in the cages we would also usually kind of set up an alternative setup. So whether we have these light flight balls that actually spin true, much more like mid 2000s spin rate, whereas junior hack attack, they really don't spin it the same. But we would set up like exaggerated movement shapes, so like a two-seamer, but it's like a Chris Sale two-seamer, right? And they're light flight, so the guys can take swings without the repercussions of getting blown up. So really, and then like in the other cage, we would set up more movement stuff. So they're kind of being able to do like movement prep stuff, whether it be if they want to do a little bit of tee, they want to hit front toss, plyos, right? Whatever, they can do some movement stuff. Then they can go to the machine in the cage, hit some pretty exaggerated shapes, different stuff. And then on field, whether it's hand thrown, dual machine setup, whatever it may be, right? Whatever we're doing for the day, then they kind of get a dose of all those environments. Again, as we talk, kind of skill blending together.
Yeah. So, I mean, you basically created like a pitch profiling system where you could create different pitch profiles and throw them at your hitters and find out like exactly where their strengths and weaknesses were against the type of pitchers that they're probably going to face throughout the season, right?
Yep. And so,
yes,
and then
that's phenomenal work too, because you got to think about like if you can replicate the guy you're going to face as close as you can using the tools that you have, then that's going to allow them to practice as closely related to facing that live arm as they can and prepare for it.
Absolutely. No, yeah, it was really effective. Obviously, like, data is only as good as you use it. Like, a lot of people are against data, a lot of people are for it, whatever, there's opinions, but it's just a tool. It's just a measurement tool, and it's how you use it. Data doesn't define our hitters. Just because one guy's not good at steep, like high release, steep descent angle doesn't mean when the game comes on the line, like, oh, you just give up your at bat because that's the guy you're facing.
Right. And
But
you may not even you're not going to get that pitch in that same spot every single time anyway, but you develop plans, you know, to improve that weakness or avoid swinging there that often, you know.
and to kind of build off that, just like two little points that I hope I can touch on is the number one thing that I saw, which is going to shock a lot of people, is the best hitters are not consistent; they're variable. And what I mean by that is the best hitters have the ability to change their swing pitch to pitch to what they are seeing, not to what they saw. So just as like a little context, like we did a lot of contrast stuff. So we did like 3 feet off the mound, left and right. So like extreme righty lefty. And then we also did extreme vertical. So like big hack, big legs, junior hack on the ground. Right. And we alternated between, and then looked at like the averages and the standard deviation between, not each setup, right, but between going left to right and going up and down. And what we saw is the best players were not consistent. They were able to go from a 14-degree attack angle, right, or like a more uphill bat path to a flatter bat path to match the flatter pitch plane, right? And like most people always think like, oh, you got to build a swing that you can repeat. Like, not at all. You're trying to build a swing that 10,000 different swings is what you're really trying to build.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're not going to get the same pitch in the same spot in the same at bat probably 5 times. You know, if you see 5 pitches, they very well be maybe 5 fastballs. It's doubtful that they're going to be 5 in a row, but they're probably going to be 5 different spot fastballs. You know, and this in simplistic terms, hitting off the tee is the same spot. Moving the tee around, you start to work some different spots, and then when you elevate that really low skill setting into what you're talking about creating, like in this round of BP, you're going to see pitches from different angles, and you're going to see pitches at different quadrants in the strike zone. How well does your swing play in all of those locations? And it's not necessarily the same swing, probably has the same principles, but you have the ability to match the pitch in those different quadrants with a little bit of a different approach angle or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
Because that's the environment you're going to be tested in a game, you know, especially today. I mean, guys are throwing fastballs at the top with a little bit of ride, and then you got a guy who's sinking at the bottom, and you got the horizontal break wipeout slider guys like Blake Trinan is just like, it looks like he's playing blitz ball in the backyard with some of the pitch profiles he has.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just amazing that you're able to do stuff like that with the guys that you were working with there. And with I think it's like you said, that you had one of the better offenses for that spring for a reason, you know, and it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intentional, deliberate, you know, practice plans and training environments.
Yeah. And just a kind of two little things to add to that is, number one, you were saying even like, right, like you're not going to see the same pitch. And maybe this is, very, very like high level. So not so much for like the younger kids or, even for like, it doesn't matter as much the average person, but just to conceptualize like every pitch, right? Like no pitcher has the same release point, right? Like if you like we have their release points, we get all of their release point, right? So, and you get all the pitch data. So like one pitcher in one inning, he might have like a variation of 4 inches in his release height, right? And then he also might have 2 to 3 inches variation in his release side. So that's changing the angle. Also, like how he pressures the ball. Maybe he just pushes a little bit with one finger. Now the spin axis is slightly different, right? Like you're literally, you have to think of like you have infinite amounts of combinations, right? Of how the ball's coming at you. Granted, you can't distinctly perceive that. But again, to go to what we were saying is like, the more you challenge yourself in that setting, like, and you see so much variability, your brain innately becomes good at being able to adjust to things that you don't even necessarily practice, right? Like if you can do this and this, you can fill the in-between in, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, unless we're creating robots to play the game, they're not going to repeat the exact same functional body movement over and over, like same slot, same spot, you know. And especially at the youth level. I mean, if we've got some of our best motor skilled athletes performing these movements, think about the youth pitchers. I mean, their windups can change from pitch to pitch at 12 years old. So they get a lot of variability. And then you've got, more arc in the ball at 11 and 12 years old when they're pitching it. So when you talk about like using technology and using data, it's only as useful as the person who's is interpreting the data and how they use it. I know a lot of people who have a hit tracks and it's just a machine that sits there and it's like an arcade because they don't use the data that it provides. They don't even provide reports to their players. So you can have a Rapsodo, you can have a hit tracks, you can have the blast, or the diamond kinetics or whatever, but if you don't know how to use the information, it's kind of useless,
Yeah, without a doubt. And just what you were talking about, about building setups, like one of the coolest stories I think we had was Lake Sumter State College, in our conference. They usually don't have a lot of velo guys, just being honest. They get a lot of crafty guys, right? Like they get guys that are what I would consider pitchers, right? Like they mix pitches, they change speeds, they might just take like one or two off the fastball just to get you off the end. They're just like, they have different arm slots. Like they're really variable guys. And they had this subby guy that was just our bane of our existence for my first half season and the second year. And I think they threw him like every time it was a tight game in late innings. Like, so we're playing them for our final conference one. And I was like, you know what, man, like, yeah, we're not seeing these other guys, but I know we're going to see them if the game matters. So I was like, I know it's untraditional, but I got there early and I was like, we're doing the subby setup. Like, I don't care. And just to be honest, even it was funny because our coaches, our head coach and our other hitting guy and pitching guy, they're like, that's really the pregame setup you want? And I was like, yeah, because like, I know we can hit the rest, but like we struggle against this guy. And like, lo and behold, it's like late in the game, it's tie ball game. And we end up, I think, coming back and scoring like 6. We had like 8 straight hits off of him. And the guy, a freshman, I don't know if he was pinch hitting or just had his game that game, but hits a double to left center for like 2-3 runs to walk it off, So it's like, it was just funny that was the day we hit that pregame setup, and that was finally the time, that we got to him. So that stuff matters. It really, really does. Like if you can see it and you can practice it, it makes a huge impact.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were talking about the advances in information that is available for big league hitters and for professional hitters. They pretty much have the most detailed scouting report on every pitcher they're probably going to see within the series, the starting rotation, the bullpen arms, and they're able to just jump down into the cages and replicate those pitch profiles. And if you know a Kenley Jansen is coming in to pitch, you can jump in the cages. If you're probably going to pinch hit in a roll, they'll send that guy down there and they'll replicate his profile, and you're stepping in the box with a little bit more preparation, and that's kind of like what you're doing there. The subby guys probably who they're bringing in a key situation. So let's just be prepared for it as best we can if they do bring him in, and we've got a pretty good shot to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, you spot on.
With you getting into the professional baseball industry and just starting out and things like that, like are there things you've learned now without getting into any insider secrets and stuff like that within the organization, but are there things you learn now that kind of open your eyes more, or are you kind of like haven't gotten that far in yet?
Yeah, a couple, I guess. Spending a week, I got to spend a week with the assistant player development guy, which is they have a hitting and a pitching guy, and then also the hitting coordinator. And then the high A and double A hitting coach were all there when I was here, or when I was there this week. So, definitely got to like bounce a lot of ideas and like concepts and just different views that say the same thing. But I'll also tell you, like, a big part of why like I think it was a good fit for me and also for them is like we have the same beliefs. It's like I wouldn't want to go to an organization where just to be in professional baseball where I have to lie through my teeth every day just to appease somebody. that was a big reason why I think it was such a good mutual fit is we have a lot of same beliefs, and again, not without giving out any trade secrets or insider stuff, but just really like mutual belief systems on that type of thing of trying to match pitch setups and teach guys to be variable and just all those things I think are really what we've gone over. But I also think like the depth of it will come. Like there's going to be a lot that I learned that's much more intricate than I already know.
Yeah, I mean, you're not reinventing the wheel of hitting because, that's not what people are trying to do at all. But I saw something on social media today that was talking about the simple motto of hit strikes hard. And they're talking about, wow, that's so revolutionary. Like if only we had known that in Little League, but everybody complains out of the other side of their mouth that hitting coaches today or hitting instruction today is just overcomplicating things. And I'm like, well, this guy's just saying the simple motto or the simple principle behind their training environment is hit strikes hard, and you're complaining that that's too simple. So it's kind of like, well, it's too complicated, it's too simple. Like, what are people actually looking for, and what's to complain about?
Yeah. I think it's what's hard for people is it has to be both, but as we've touched on a bunch is it has to be the right time. Like sometimes just using guys again at CF, like you have the guys that can be very, very intricate, right? Like we had a catcher who's at University of New Orleans now. Like honestly, this dude's gonna be like an amazing hitting coach when he's done playing, right? Like knows hitting so in depth. But it was also his Achilles heel because it's like at one point he was hitting like four something, and he's like, in BP, he's like, "Hey, I think I'm feeling," and I was like, "Miguel, shut up, like, shut up, just stop, like, just stop.
Overanalyzer.
Yeah, like just go hit, please." Like, and then you also have the guy where it's like he's 0 for 27, and it's like, yeah, I think I'm just missing, or it's just not me, and it's like, no, it's the stuff we've been trying to get you to do right for X amount of time. Again, I think it's just really hard to balance that. And as you said a bunch, is just knowing your people it's more, coaching is more personal or soft skills than it is even technical skills. Um, I was talking to one of the other guys for the Rangers about this. Like, it's funny how there's guys who are just terrible technical coaches, right? Like they really don't know anything about hitting, but their dudes rake. Like they put them in the right environments, they say the right things, right? Like they have a way about them. But then you have the most technically knowledgeable skill guy, whatever, and it's like his teams are terrible. Like they can't hit, the hitters can't hit, they don't know anything about the game, and so it's just kind of like a paradox. You're always in between that.
Yeah, we had a funny a little joke. We don't want to talk nerdy because people talk about talking dirty and stuff, but we're like, don't talk too nerdy to the players, whether it's the pitcher or the hitter or whatever, because we don't want them thinking about the descent angle of the pitch and the horizontal break or whatever. We just want them to go and step in the box and be that kid in the backyard who looked for a good pitch they could drive and they could hit it. Like there's a time and a place, and in the on deck circle is not exactly the time and the place to be so nerdy. They don't have those soft skills or those people skills.
Yeah, no, and actually to even kind of build off that, what's something that's really cool that we had going on this fall was like, I think being able to relate nerdy concepts to simplistic things that are actionable. So, for example, like, yeah, we'll talk to the college guys, like, we've had in-depth talks talking about how like attack angle, right, and descent angle, and like all these things, right? Do they have to understand it perfect? No, but a general idea. But then we tie it into a more simplistic, like actionable concept. So like one of the coolest things like that almost made me shed a tear at first base this fall was we're seeing a guy, and one of the guys we had that was a transfer, so I'd only had him for that semester, only a couple weeks, and he comes in the dugout and he's like, "Hey guys, it's like machine setup 2. Like just think machine setup 2." And it's like, our next couple guys go out and it's like, yeah, I think we got a couple barrels, had some hits. Not like all of a sudden we hit 5 home runs, but like, for them to be able to like take that, and it's like, that's a player helping his teammates with an actual concept. Like, he's not saying, the descent angle's 5 degrees. It's just like, hey guys,
but
like,
he can relate it.
Exactly. Like, he's like, this is what we've practiced. Like, this is what it feels like. Like, you guys know what machine setup 2 feels like. Like, let's go hit machine setup 2. And
that's
so
the
cool.
big thing. I mean, like, you on the one end of it, you can understand it as in depth as you want to from a technical side and match all the relationships up. You just got to figure out how to relay that information to the athlete and to the hitter, who, like, it's almost like being the conduit. Some guys you can probably explain it into more detail because they speak that language and they want it. Other guys, you're sending the same message, but in a different way that matches what they relate to.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to find the right way to talk to the right guys.
Yeah, there are some guys, I think, who, if you gave them that information, they would probably overthink and become a robot or whatever. Like, I mean, you can talk about like the biomechanics of the swing. Like, we've got K-Vest now, we've got the 4D motion, we've got all the blast data about early connection and connection and impact and forward tilt and side bend. Like, you can get all into the intricate details of the degrees of this and that. But at the end of the day, some hitters don't need to know it all. Some hitters just want to know, like, okay, I don't care. I just want you to tell me how I fix it.
Yeah.
And then some hitters want to know, okay, all that makes sense. They want the full report. They want to know exactly what it is because they do understand that language and they're interested in it, and it does connect with them, where the other guys just like, yeah, I believe you. Just tell me how to fix it. Tell me how to get into better forward bend and turn it into side bend or whatever.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny how you can have the same conversation with a lot of different guys. And just even, as an example, like, I've had a couple guys for 3 seasons, basically, or, like 5 semesters ish. And so, like, as that's grown, I could have more, like, they've heard me talk these concepts. So like Kevin Kilpatrick was a guy we had, like, it was so cool to see his evolution over the time of like being together, because it started as like, just like, hey Kev, like, not this, right? And then like, then it got into like right before I left, where he's like, hey, like, I'm feeling like on certain guys, like, if they have like a big move, like like, say whatever they're doing, like, I'm gonna like just go with like a smaller hand move in this, but like guys who have like a longer, arm action, whatever, like, I can do this, or like, just kind of those conversations. And it's really cool to see that evolve. But then, again, just what you said, like, we had a catcher that, like, he really doesn't care to know. And so it's just like, hey coach, how was that round? And it's like, too flat, like more uphill. Okay. That's like, for him, it's just like, be more uphill, be more flat, be more downhill. Like, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, speak their language, and if they can connect with it, for one, as long as they trust you, they're going to believe what you say. But you got to send that message in their language for sure. So, in respect of your time, and I know you're busy and everything, we're going to get ready and wrap up. I want to leave the end of it open for like any, like, what do you want to leave the audience with? Like, if there's something that you haven't been able to talk about that you really want to hit on, and any advice you might want to give for a player who's coming out of high school who wants to play collegiately, or any advice you would want to give for aspiring hitting coaches who want to help their players develop.
Yeah. Man, I guess number one would be for players is your ego. Well, everyone, honestly, your ego is going to be your enemy. Like, personally, like, I went through it. There was a time, like, we were really good. And that first little bit I was there, and, it's like, you kind of develop that. And then my summer season coming back wasn't that good. And then, it was like, you kind of go through those ups and downs, and it's like, oh, wow, maybe I don't know as much as I think, or like, I haven't, I'm not arrived. And then it's like, you kind of humble yourself and then go back. And then it was like that humbling experience led to all the things that I wanted to do for that next season. And then it was like, you just kind of go through those waves. So you're always going to experience, I think the best people are going to have a little bit of ego, overconfidence, whatever, but it's managing that and balancing it and being able to let that drive you, but also being able to take a step back and say like, okay, it's my time to shut my mouth and like listen and learn and do things like that as a player and as a coach. As far as like aspiring coaches or parents, and this is probably one people don't want to hear, is like, listen, don't talk. Like, ask your players questions, ask them what they're feeling. Don't tell them what they feel or what they're supposed to feel. Like, the body is so complex, and like, we won't even get into it, but it's like everybody's bones, like your femurs might be different lengths, like you might have different muscle fiber type, like muscle fiber shapes, like in your body, it's so complex. So how you conceptualize and feel things is not at all how someone else does. And when you try to, especially parents, like when you try to tell your kids what to feel, or like, you're just brutally hard on them, like they don't want to play the game. And to be honest, like this is the last hard hitting thing I have is like, how much does coaching really matter? Like, and I'm a professional baseball coach, and I say that, like, what would happen if there was no coaches? What if we just rolled the ball out and let them figure it out? Like, there would still be a lot of elite players, right? So sometimes I think we like to think we have more of an impact than we do. And sometimes we probably think we have less of an impact than we actually do. And I think sometimes the impact is more on the personal side of how you treat and interact with people. And, just being a model for people, like that's the most special part that I've experienced is, kids that maybe they don't go on to play Power 5 baseball, but they play small time D3, but like they never even thought they could achieve that. And, that's really special. So I guess, yeah, we talked about a lot of things, but those would be my simple things. It's like, at the end of the day, it's a game. We love it. That's why we're a part of it, but keep it in that context. Like, it's not life or death. How you treat people matters a lot more than the game itself.
Yeah, and you brought up a very good point. Sometimes we can help or we can hinder, a child's development. And you talked about a little bit on the parent side, just be careful. And I would say, like, sometimes coaching can get in the way of a kid learning. I know for me, and kids don't do it as much these days, but I grew up on the weekends playing wiffle ball with all of my neighborhood buddies. And I think we learned the game of baseball a lot on like those wiffle ball days on the weekend where we just played from sun up to sundown, and we would stop just for long enough to grab pizza for lunch. But we just played, and we figured out like making mistakes was not, we weren't scared to, we weren't fearful to make a mistake because we didn't have umpires. We didn't even have parents watching. We just went and, found my grandma's backyard and invited all our buddies over and made up our little bases. Like, first base was a tree and second base was a corner of a house or something. And
they weren't even
exactly. Like, we're just out there playing, and okay, I threw it to the wrong base and I gave up a run, but guess what? I learned it in the process. And now, I've talked about this before. I think a lot of kids, unfortunately, they only get to learn the game when there's a scoreboard, an umpire, and another team, and they're always scared to mess up, because they think it's going to be the end of the world.
Absolutely. Embrace failure. Don't fear it.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you jumping on. Like, I just literally sent Collin a DM on Twitter the other day, very last minute notice, just asking if he'd be interested in coming on. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out of this transition that you're currently going through. And I know there's a lot of responsibilities and moving around and stuff you've got going on right now. So first of all, I just want to thank you for taking the time to jump on and do the live show and give us some information, that can help us all learn and grow and hopefully have a better impact on the people that we're working with.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love this kind of stuff. It's actually like my first opportunity to do something like this. So I thought it was a really cool opportunity. And, I love to hopefully give back to the game the way people before me gave to me, and made me love it. So The last thing I would say to leave that is, I think you have my Twitter on there. Like, anyone feel free to shoot me a DM, ask me questions, stuff like that. I love talking baseball with people, and I'd love to connect with people if they have any questions about anything.
Yeah, man. Thanks again, Collin, and best of luck in your adventure. And I'll definitely try to come see you down in Kinston.
Love that, man. I love that. Pleasure. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, man. Take care.